most people who have a metal type, they like definition and structure and discipline. They like kind of rigidity in life, right? Rules and regulations. Tend to be moralistic kinds of people, like an upright, standing person, like reason and principle. Hi, welcome back to the Chinese Medicine Podcast. My name is Marie Hopkinson. I'm a herbalist and an acupuncturist. And today we're going to be talking about the metal type and personality types in Chinese medicine, particularly the metal. So we're going to talk about 5 different types, and there'll be different videos on each one. So this might be interesting to you if you're interested in the philosophy of Chinese medicine, if you're a student of Chinese medicine, or you're a patient of a herbalist or an acupuncturist, and you want to know a little bit more about you. Lots of people who watch this channel or listen in on the audio podcast, I know they're just very keen about learning about Chinese medicine, which is great. And this is one of the aspects where, by knowing more about yourself, you can understand why do these things happen to me? Why am I always in this particular situation? Maybe physically, like why do you constantly get colds and flus? Why do you constantly get like a pattern, maybe like liver chi stagnation, where you get frustrated and angry a lot? Why do you get things happen psychologically, like where you think, I'm always treaded on by other people. I feel like I can't, put my opinions forward, or things like that. There are constitutions in Chinese medicine. Now, different practitioners or styles of Chinese medicine kind of rely on these more or less than others. So the stock standard TCM stuff that's taught in schools, they kind of touch on this, but it's not really a big part of the curriculum. It's not a big part of how we think about it. It's definitely a big part of how the 5-element acupuncturists think about people. So they think you've got a particular constitution and an elemental type, and for you to deviate away from that is a pathology. Whereas in Chinese medicine, they wouldn't necessarily think, like a standard Chinese medicine practitioner wouldn't necessarily think a lot like that. So what's the metal type about? The metal element relates to our lungs and to our large intestine. So there can be some things about metal that relate to those, to people who have a constitutional type like that, just would naturally relate to that. So most people who have a metal type, I'm going to give you the basic kinds of things. They like definition and structure and discipline. They like kind of rigidity in life, right? Rules and regulations. Tend to be moralistic kinds of people, like an upright, standing person, morals and like reason and principle, right? The proper order of things. Maybe not so much, not so much prone to doing things at a whim or to at a carefree, fancy kind of thing, right? Like respect, discipline, and authority. So you often see these kinds of people maybe in politics or in positions of like CEO or that kind of, even those father figure type of people, that like that stoicism type of thing, where like I think like people like my dad, who has been in the army, who likes a structure. He's an English person, and that was very commonly a part of the culture of growing up. Now, some of these things might be just who you are as a person, but it also could be instilled upon you, maybe more so or more nurtured, depending on the culture in which you grow up. Now, there's lots of people who grow up in a particular culture and then they reject that, right? Because they think, no, that's not how I want to be. But then there's other people that grow up in that same culture that think, no, I'm going to hold on to that, and I love that. And maybe that's how Chinese medicine sees why those people do that, right? Why do some people reject the culture they're in and others, embrace it? Because that's maybe who you are at the core, right? And so this is the 5-element kind of theory of this idea. So they hold themselves to a high standard if they're a metal element type of person. And they like beauty. They like kind of reverence, ceremony. So, if you're a religious person, you might really enjoy the religious ceremonial parts of things. Or even if you're not a religious person, you might like like you'll be more inclined to stick to the duty of duty of things, or the ceremony of things, just because that's the way we've always done it, and because there's some kind of meaning for you in that, just because it is the ceremony, that's the way of things. It doesn't have to be questioned and changed. And maybe the state of the world at the moment, where things are being questioned and in such a state of turmoil and change, could be very discombobulating for people like this, right? Well, when I'm filming this right now, it's the eve of the US presidential election, right? I'm in Australia. It's the daytime today. I've been watching all these live streams all day with people commentating what's going to happen. And so if you are a stoic kind of person, like a metal element person, this state of change and disarray and discombobulation of things would be very uneasy for you. You probably wouldn't like it. You'd like it to be back to the way that it was, and in that kind of sort of things. Okay, so typical problems that people have in a metal element people can experience. Their personality type can be a little bit dictatorial or autocratic, right? So just doing things for the sake of doing it, because that's the way we've always done it. Very strict and formal. Maybe they're good with things like their grammar and sticking to what's what's supposed to be, and would have trouble being in a job where you're asked to be creative and stretching the imagination a little bit, and those kinds of things. So these are probably the people that notice those spelling mistakes. They notice the grammar issues. You might have with the metal element, it relates to the lungs, and it relates to the large intestine. So if there's disorder or dysfunction in there, then sometimes you would have things like breathing problems, or getting chest infections frequently, or things like that. The metal large intestine might have constipation, or an inability to kind of let go, or let go of your bowels, let go of things. And that's part of that stoicism, right? Holding on to those principles. It might be really hard to let go of things, where even though you want to let go, or you think you might want to let go, it might be really hard to kind of do that. These kinds of people can seem really formal and maybe a little bit distant. So in relationships, it might be hard to kind of form a relationship. Maybe they show their love in a different way. Not the formal things are the ways that they would show their love, rather than other ways. Feeling maybe self-righteous, and also in a state of disillusionment. Like, why don't people just agree with the right way? Like, this is the right way. There isn't any other right way. Maybe sticking to that rigidity a little bit. But what is good about metal is that they tend to be very self-controlled and disciplined. And in that rigidity and in that discipline, they can accomplish a lot of things, because they don't get sidetracked by these other shiny objects and things like that are around there. So able to kind of plow through problems and solve things, and that's why they're probably attracted to these kinds of jobs where a lot needs to be accomplished, and they're able to do that. If they stick to the principles and they stick to the values, then they're able to kind of move forward in that trajectory quite easily, and accomplish a lot of things, because they don't kind of need to, adhere to this kind of flexible thinking of, like thinking about the whys and that kind of stuff. So discrimination and analysis is a big part of the metal element. And look, we all have these parts to us. So I'm not saying if you're not a metal element person, you don't have this. But it's very similar to like the Myers-Briggs personality types, let's say, or other systems of personality typing. We all have aspects of introversion and extroversion, let's say, but some people are more skewed towards one or the other. And so we all have to have discernment, right? Otherwise we'd never get anything done. And it's good to have some of that discernment. But people who have a metal element type, they usually don't have problem with discernment. They're usually good at doing that. To synthesize lots of complex ideas and sort of be able to move forward in that. And that probably comes from that ability to maintain, well, if I have my moral compass, then I can kind of move forward within that. So the biological functions of metal, as our breathing, like breathing in and breathing out. So there's this kind of emptying of the body. There's this emptying of the carbon dioxide. There's the emptying of the bowels with your large intestine. So that letting go and that emptying and that contracting and descending. So the large intestine contracts to be able to let go, and your lung chi is said to descend, right? That's the direction of the lung chi where it should go. So things going down. Your lungs also relate to the pores of your skin, the hair on your skin, not the hair on your head, but the hair on your skin. So body hairs. And being moisturized within those, part of your fluid metabolism is done by the lungs. This is all Chinese medicine, right? So if you're watching this and you're like, oh no, it doesn't do that. It's not a Western medicine based system that we're talking about. This is purely Chinese medicine based. So people who are metal element types are methodical. They like to talk things, step things through. They're probably very good at doing that. So maybe if you're having trouble with problem solving or knowing what to do, a metal element person would be someone you could come to, and they might be seen in the community as being a wise person because they kind of have that methodical approach and they don't really think much of it. They're just like, oh, why wouldn't you do this step by step? Like, this is what we do. So we're going to go through the states of the psyche of a metal element person based on the general psyche of them, and then if that was to be exaggerated, and then also if it was in a state of disharmony, what could happen. So in a general sense, the metal type of people tend to be very methodical, and they're kind of a scrupulous person, so they might not have too many, like, they wouldn't have crazy desires and things that they're, accumulating stuff and buying things for no need. Like there's a distinctive need to make those purchases and to get what they have in life, right? So they would not likely to have a buying motive of just fulfilling my desires, right? Tend to be very neat and calm people. They tend to be probably very good in jobs which require that methodical approach, right? So where you need to be able to, like, let's say in science or in medicine, or in leadership roles, where you might have a lot of chaos going on in things potentially if you didn't have that methodical approach. And so, assist a person that can create and stick to systems or utilize systems that are already there, that kind of stuff. Tend to be precise people, right? So wouldn't be prone to exaggerating numbers and figures, but they want to know those precise things, and they're very articulate in those things. Maybe tend to be a reserved person, not an overly exaggerative person. So you can probably think in a Myers-Briggs sense, this person is probably more likely to be an introvert, to be an I of sorts, right? Generally tend to be well regarded in their community or wherever they work, in their field, because they're good at what they do, because they're precise, because they're an exact kind of person. They tend to hold those moral values really high, that kind of stuff. And so an honourable, disciplined, calm kind of person. Tend to be fairly accepting kind of person as well. Okay, so in an exaggerated sense, so if this gets a little bit out of control, if it gets a little bit too much and not enough of other things going on, they could be a little bit ritualistic, right? Okay, I've got to do the things I've got to do because I've always done them, because this is the way. I'm not willing to look at other options or other ideas. Very rigid and too much stuck in their ways, right? And to the point of maybe being prejudiced against, other systems or other people or things that might clash against those, heartfelt, moralistic ideas. Maybe could be quite perfectionistic. So there's a difference between being precise and being accurate to being perfectionistic. So someone that is trying to create something, let's say, and they're willing to put the project out, versus someone who will spend all night going through 10 times, 20 times, checking that thing for errors, and there's definitely no errors, but they've got to check it again, and they can't really be, they can't they wouldn't be happy with themselves if there were any errors in there, even though other people would be very accepting of that if it was just a very minor thing, let's say. So that might be over the top kind of perfectionism. Bit stoic. Kind of a self-righteous can be part of this as well. So someone that just believes like their way is the only way. And dogmatic, you know, like this is what we do, and we're not changing it, and that's it. Okay, so if a person who's meant to be a metal element person loses the power of metal, let's say, loses the functionality of metal, then they would tend to have some other traits that would be there. So they might be a bit petty, a bit ceremonious, like pomp and circumstance, got to stand on that kind of thing. They might become sloppy. They might be very hard to engage with people around them in relationships, and seem very cold or numb, you know, hard to connect with people emotionally because they kind of, that aspect is kind of shut down and they don't have that ability to kind of connect in that way. They could be a compliant kind of person who just does, they're just a clock puncher person, right? Who doesn't really think outside the box or think if anything's wrong. I'm just going to do what I've been told to do because I'm just going to do it, and doesn't think twice kind of about why they're doing it. If it's maybe something that's not so great for the environment, for society, or for themselves even, they might just keep doing it because they just are they're in a state of compliance with a particular system, or with, you know, in a particular way. They don't want to really buck the system, right? Make waves. And in this kind of state, they might lack the conviction that they should have, right? They should be a person that stands on morals and that has a very strong moral compass. But if that falls away, then you know, they would sort of not have this underlying knowing that this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. It might seem a little bit elusive, right? Because they don't really know, so they're kind of dancing around the real issue there. Can have difficulty with control in either way. So a person in a metal element could want a lot of control and have very big difficulty if they don't have control, or they could over control, right? If they get a position of power, they really over control that. So you might have come across these kind of things in a workplace where someone has a particular role and you think, wow, they're just like, there's no way they're getting past that, and they're just very controlling. You think you don't need to be so controlling. Why are you over controlling this? Disappointment, because if they're a perfectionist, they can never achieve. Maybe the perfectionism is just impossible to achieve, and so they're consistently feeling disappointed, and they can never meet that standard that they've set for themselves, or maybe even set for others. Feeling like a lack of intimacy, because it's very hard to connect. This kind of elemental person can be harder to connect with people, especially if people don't see their way of the world. It can be hard to connect, so they might feel like a lack of emotional kind of intimacy, or just love intimacy with people. Metal element people can have a difficulty of like spontaneity. Like that's a big issue. So like systems and control and the way we've always done it, and you know, rigidity and these kind of things are like you know, the opposite to spontaneity, right? So they like to have plans, they like to know what they're doing. If you're dating a metal element person, then you wouldn't sort of say, let's go on a date and I'll call you tomorrow and I'll let you know, like just get in the car and I'll surprise you. They probably won't like that. They would want to know what they're doing so they can plan, so that they can plan it in their mind the day before or even the week before. They can know what they're going to wear, because they would feel like if they rocked up somewhere and they weren't dressed appropriately, they would feel really bad. Or it wouldn't be perfect. They wouldn't have been able to do, you know, they like knowing the details, they like knowing that sort of stuff. So they can really struggle with spontaneity. And so if you're, you know, got a partner that's kind of like that, then that might be really difficult. But also if life changes and the spontaneity of life, they might really struggle with change. So these kinds of people could be very resistant to change, right? So talking about like making this video today with the you know, when we're having an election, this can make these kinds of people very nervous and very, very upset, or easily worried, or just, you know, discombobulated because of that potential of change. And they don't like that necessarily, like, you know, especially faced with like major moral principles or major codes of conduct are going to be changed. You know, these people would find that stuff very, very difficult. So they're the main things about the metal element. And if you think you're an archetypal metal person, then you would have resonated with most of the stuff that I've been saying about this. Maybe you've got a friend or a partner or someone like that. And this is just very interesting stuff about Chinese medicine. It can help us by understanding who we are and our personality types, but it can also help us understand why do we get sick or have, you know, face these frequent health issues that just seem to happen to this person or that person or something like that. So I hope this has been useful and helpful to you. And if it has, make sure you click the subscribe button and the like button below. If you're new to the channel, welcome along. Really want to say thank you so much to people for supporting the channel and subscribing, and I look forward to seeing you again on the next videos. Thanks for listening to the Chinese Medicine Podcast. Did you know we're also on TikTok? And you can find shorter videos on Facebook and Instagram that you might like to share with your friends and family. You can also find our podcast on Apple, Spotify, and all places where you listen to audio podcasts. I look forward to seeing you again on the next video soon. And if you think you're an archetypal